Hey everybody, how's it going? Well, in this video, I'm gonna talk to you guys about my 1994 Toyota pickup that I call Bandit. Man, where do I start this story? Well, let's go all the way back to 2018 is when I first got this truck. And this truck was not a runner when I got it. So I went to a local wrecking yard and I was actually looking for some parts for a different project that I was working on. And I came across this truck. It had no wheels and tires, sitting on the ground. The driver's side door was missing. And, oh, let's see here. And the engine was locked up. So, anybody who has the right sense in their mind would have just walked right past this thing and gone, nah, this truck's too far gone. Not me. For some reason, when I saw this truck, I fell in love with it. So I paid 500 bucks for it, and the owner of the wrecking yard did allow me to grab parts off of other vehicles to make it a complete unit, threw some wheels and tires on it, and I drug it home. And that is where the story began. So now that I've got this hunk of junk sitting in my garage, I had a lot of work ahead of me. And I really didn't know what direction I wanted to go with the truck at the time. I thought about, turning into a rock crawler. I was hanging out with a group of friends that were kind of pushing me to get back into the rock crawling thing. And I was actually really close, like this close to doing that and going that direction with that truck. But I started falling more in love with the overlanding. And I said, no, this truck would be really, really cool to build as an overlander, because everything that I've been looking online at the time, there was no single cab third gen Toyota truck overlanders. And so I thought, well, hey, why not be the first, right? And my idea behind it too was it's gonna be cheap on gas, and also it's a very small compact unit, so I can get into a lot more places because of how small it is. And that spark just grew into a fire in my mind, and it was on. I had to build this truck. So the first thing that I needed to do was I needed to source myself an engine, because the engine that I had was no good. And after doing some investigation on that engine to see if I could salvage it, the valve head where it seats into the cylinder head snapped off and fell down on top of the piston, and then it actually put a hole in the side of the cylinder and actually blew out the casting internally. So that entire thing was junk and I couldn't even rebuild it. So I went on the hunt and I did find myself another 22RE engine, so I took it apart and did you know, some gaskets and seals and stuff like that on that engine, and keep in mind, at the time when I was building this, I had very little funding. It was actually kind of a lower point in my life, and this truck was going to be my escape. And so I was trying to, you know, pretty much junkyard build this truck. And so with that said, I did what I could to the engine without actually giving it a full rebuild. Dropped it in the truck, fired up, heard it running. I'm like, yes, this is going to be awesome. I've got a running engine that I only paid a couple $100 for from the wrecking yard, and I start driving it, and lo and behold, it's got a weird knock sound to it. And what was interesting was it wasn't a rod bearing that was bad, it was actually the wrist pin. So where the connecting rod goes into the piston, there's a pin that connects the two, and that developed a whole bunch of slop, so it would have a weird rattle to it. And so I consulted my local rebuild shop, who I'm good friends with, and I said, am I going to do any more damage? You know, is it going to catastrophically fail on me? And he said, no, it's going to make noise, just run it until you find another engine. So that's what I did. I ran it until I was able to find another engine. So now, having a truck that potentially runs and drives, it was time to start building it as an Overlander. And so the whole vehicle is actually very basic, and the lift that I did on the truck is a 2.5 inch ball joint spacer lift in the front. And for the rear, what I did is I took the factory leaf springs, removed the overload leaf, and then I took another set of factory leaf springs and I chopped them down accordingly and stacked them to give me a very thick leaf pack to handle the weight, but also it was relatively smooth because it was all factory leaf springs. And that actually gave me enough lift and also could hold the weight of the gear to run a 33-inch tire. And the system actually worked really well, and actually today, still now, the truck's running that suspension. And then I ended up getting a set of KYB Monomax shocks for it, and it's been doing amazing actually. The truck drives very well on the highway. It has really nice handling, comfort, smoothness, and then when I get off-road, yeah, it's independent front suspension, but I actually removed the front sway bar, and that actually allowed the truck to flex out pretty well, and surprisingly it does pretty good. Now what I also did was I did some wheeling and dealing, and I ended up getting myself a ARB rear locker. So I thought, well, to compensate for the lack of flex, I could have this additional rear locker that will get me through stuff. And the system's been working pretty well, and honestly I kind of want to change it and I kind of don't. And I'll talk more about that down the road of what my plans are with the truck. So now I've got this truck. It's running and driving. It's got a lift kit on it. I've got my additional traction of the rear locker. I've got myself a set of 265 75 R16 tires. It was time to make this truck look a little bit nicer. So, like I said, I had to kind of piece the truck back together from different parts from other vehicles. So I gave the whole truck a paint job, and you're gonna get a kick out of this. So I liked the color black, and I thought, well, I'm gonna just go ahead and leave the truck black. And I'm not really one to color change a vehicle, because you know, when you respray a vehicle, then when you open up the hood and you see that the inside around the engine bay, it's different color and all that kind of stuff, it's kind of a hassle. So what I ended up doing for a paint job is I went down to my local farm store, bought a gallon of black tractor enamel paint for $30, and I sprayed the whole truck, and then to keep the paint from fading, because it's tractor paint, it's not the best quality, I went to my local auto parts store and I bought a gallon of clear coat for 80 bucks. So not bad for a paint job. And honestly, I thought the truck looked beautiful. I wasn't going for any show quality finish. I just wanted the truck to be all one color, and this truck was going to be used. And so I know it was going to get scratches and stuff like that. So, you know, it wasn't the best paint job. You know, one of those 30 feet back. Yeah, it looks great. No, it's better than that. Let's say 10 feet quality paint job. But the truck turned out beautiful, and it was so awesome seeing it after I painted it, because it was starting to come together, which was really awesome. So now I've got a freshly painted truck. It's running and driving. It's got its lift. It's got its wheels and tires. It was time to start setting this up for overlanding. Now, I wanted to fabricate my own stuff, like bumpers, so that's what I did. First, I fabricated a front bumper for it. Then I built a bed rack for the truck, and that way I can mount my rooftop tent and all my other gear. And then I built a rear bumper for the truck. And honestly, it turned out great, but it wasn't quite right. I needed to change a few things. So after using the truck for a while, I wasn't really happy with the setup of the back. The rack that I built for the bed of the truck, I used way too heavy of a material. I actually fabricated the whole thing out of 1 3/4 by 1/8 inch wall tubing. And it was a little too heavy for that truck. So I decided to change it up. And my next setup that I had on the truck was I built another rack out of square tubing. And this square tubing I used 1 1/4 by 1/16 wall, and I did not make it a full height rack, which means I didn't build it to the height of the cab. I actually made it a 3/4 height rack, so then that way when I had the rooftop tent on the truck, it was flush with the top of the cab. And that system wasn't too bad. I did not mind that rack. The only downside is I couldn't open up my cooler with that rack. I had to completely remove the cooler out of the bed of the truck, turn it sideways on the tailgate, and then I could access what I needed. And then I also found that I really could not stack anything up. So I have these black totes that I use to keep all of my camping equipment and the kitchen and all that stuff in. And once I got those slid into the bed of the truck, I had like just barely enough room to put like a chair on top of it. So that was kind of a drawback with that rack. And then another thing that was starting to kind of get to me was with that setup, when it rains here in Wyoming, we get some really bad mud. Nasty, clay, sticky, gooey stuff. And I really didn't like having everything that I was using for camping exposed to the weather in the back of the truck, and then if the rain came in, oh man, everything was covered either with dust or mud. So it was time to change up the setup on the back of the truck again. The next setup that I decided to go with on the back of the truck was a canopy for the bed, so then that way all of my gear would be protected from the weather. And I had a really good buddy that had actually a canopy on his trailer that he used for overlanding, and so I was actually able to trade him the rack that I built for this canopy. Was it the best shaped canopy? No, but it was going to keep my stuff nice and dry. And so I did the swap with him, got it mounted on the truck, and I've been rocking it ever since. And I'm so glad that I actually decided to go that route, because there's nothing like getting to your camp and all of your stuff is just absolutely disgusting because it's either covered with a buttload of dust or mud. So yeah, I was kind of done with the bed racks on that. And yeah, all I did was I made a mount for my CB antenna, and then I made some mounts, one on each side of the canopy for the onboard air system, and that was it. And I've been rocking it ever since. Is it the best setup? No, it could definitely have some improvements. So let's talk about where this truck has taken me and what's the future to come. So, what are the plans for the black truck? And it took me a while to really think about what direction I wanted to go with this truck. And remember how I was telling you about traveling around the world? Yep. That's what I'm gonna do with Bandit. So, this is exciting. I'm very excited to do this build, but I also need you guys' help on this. So what my plans are with the truck is I'm going to change the suspension around a little bit. I do believe I'm going to do a solid axle swap just because there's less moving parts and also the strength of the solid axle. So I'm gonna do the solid axle swap, and I'm gonna give myself a little bit better of a living quarters on the back of the truck. Now the bed is a 6-foot bed. That's standard with the trucks. What my plans are is I'm actually gonna cut the bed, the front of it, and I'm gonna extend it into a 7-foot long bed. Because yeah, believe it or not, in the early 90s, these trucks came in a standard cab long bed, which is 7 feet, setup. So I thought, oh, how cool would that be to have the truck set up in that configuration? So I'm gonna cut the frame, cut the box, and I'm gonna extend it out to a 7-foot bed. Then I'm gonna build my own canopy camper on the bed, on the back of the truck. And I'm really excited to do that build. But also another big improvement on the truck is I'm gonna convert it to diesel. Now, many years ago, I bought myself a Toyota 1KZ TE 3-liter turbo diesel engine. And I'm very excited to do this swap. Now, why am I doing diesel? Well, I think the power to weight ratio will be much better. And also I think the MPGs, the miles per gallon, will be better. Also, when I start traveling around into these other countries, diesel is actually more prominent than gas, so the cost of diesel is actually going to be cheaper. So, also, this engine, this Toyota 1K ZTE, is a international engine. They used it in the Land Cruisers, the Hilux, the Surf, and the Hiace van. So, and I can still get parts for this engine right now in the US and around the world. So I think that's going to be a really nice engine to have. And it's going to be epic. Oh, and so my tire size that I am going to run on it is I'm going to stick with a 33-inch tall tire. Right now the truck's got 32s, but honestly 33s will be just perfect for that truck. So yeah, that's the life, or the story of Bandit, the 1994 Toyota pickup. Well, I hope you guys join me on this amazing adventure of building this truck. And like I said, I need your help with this, guys and gals. And the way that you can help me is by going over to dboverland.com and buy yourself a t-shirt, a hoodie, a hat. I've got some really cool stuff on there, and when you guys purchase that stuff, it helps fund the projects and the adventures. Also, I'm going to be right now I'm currently working on a Patreon account, and then that way you guys can help support the adventure that way as well. So come join me, come help me do this, build this amazing machine that you guys will be able to see in action and in person, because I'm going to travel around and you know, do get-togethers so you guys can see the build and help fuel the adventure. Well, until next time, guys, we'll see you guys out on the trail. And don't forget to like and subscribe.